You're listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.
Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Today in Manufacturing podcast. With me this week are Jeff Reinke and Anna Wells. We each have more than 15 years of experience covering the manufacturing industry. Every week, we take the 5 most popular stories on our websites and discuss the implications they have on the industry going forward. Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at IEN.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And Pete, if you're there, subscribe to us on YouTube. Then you'll get that notification every time we go live every Thursday. But if not, just keep emailing me, man. I'll send it out. You know, we'd like to have you there. Jeff, how you doing this week?
Well, David, thank you for asking. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
Good
and
here.
Pete's most likely here too. So there's at least 4 of us.
Thanks for joining us, Pete.
Yeah. Anna, how you doing this week?
Doing great, thanks.
Yeah, you ready to jump in?
I'm ready. Why is the camera so close to us today?
Because we have a different setup that's like same but closer. And it's it's like we're being not catfish. We're being gaslit. They're gaslighting us in the studio.
You mean like the camera's not really on?
Maybe not. Maybe none of this is real.
Is it all part of the
With that, let's begin.
All right. Well, before we get started, we have a word from our sponsor, Big Commerce. And we're back. And just a reminder that Big Commerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems. ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, Big Commerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to Big Commerce today. You know what? I think I'm singing it next week. I think I'm going to sing it next week.
I double dog dare you.
All right. Both dogs have been dared. Our first story this week. Solar panels on water canals seem like a no-brainer. Well, let's just say that it looks grim. Devastating heat, a record-breaking wildfire, an impending crisis on the Colorado River. All bad. However, there is now a snowballing effort to fight climate change, and it's yielding some innovative, but not exactly new ideas. 8 years ago, Jordan Harris and Robin Raj first pitched their idea to address water loss and climate pollution. They wanted to build solar panels over irrigation canals. 8 years ago, nobody cared. But now, Solar Aquagrid is preparing to break ground on the first solar-covered canal project in the United States. The idea is simple. Install solar panels over canals in sunny, water-scarce regions where they reduce evaporation and make electricity. Jeff, I feel like you're all in on board on this one.
I do. I don't agree. First of all, climate change.
What?
Did you write this or did you get a little help?
I think there is a snowballing effort I think that it's becoming more and more.
That is a pun
real.
that could have been inspired by someone else potentially is all I'm saying.
Oh, gotcha. No. Oh, yeah. It could have been inspired by my wife, but like just after years of punning, it's just in there, man.
It's just ingrained now?
In there.
He can't.
Okay,
help
gotcha.
it,
Yeah, I can't stop it.
I guess I didn't get the feeling that it was ignored. I think they just looked at all of the potential challenges that were in the way in terms of cost and how are we going to make this happen. I think they were looking at it more from how are we going to find the land to do some of these things as opposed to looking at the problem more intensely.
Ignored.
And realizing, in my opinion, it's really kind of one of those cost versus consequence type of situation. Yes, there's cost associated with it, but when you're looking at severe drought, you're looking at a way to get more water to more people, and then you've got this potential energy source right there, literally right in front of you. I think you can find a way to get past a lot of those inhibitions, like those costs. So I think it's great that we're getting more creative and more innovative with these renewable energy opportunities that are there. This one just makes too much sense, especially when you're looking at government infrastructure. I think almost every government building should have solar panels on it. It just seems to make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
And I think the more of this we do, the more of those restrictions are going to come down in terms of cost, especially. The more you do something, the more product in the marketplace, the more demand for it. That usually eases some of those concerns for cost, installation, maintenance, all of that. So ideally, the more of this we do, the better we get. And the other thing I kind of reminded me of is another story we ran this week on our food manufacturing website, where a place in Germany basically found that some crops grow just as well or better underneath these solar panels. They benefit from the fact that there's not just being hammered by the sun, basically. They've got some relief from that. So over in Germany, they found especially hops. That's a product that's a plant that does especially well without as much sun. So they're putting these solar panels right above the crops in the fields, and they're also experimenting with other types of grains and fruit and vegetable types of crops as well. So the more of this we do, I think the fewer restrictions we're going to find. And that's why we have to keep pushing some of these things forward. It just makes so much sense to make better use of all this land, especially when we're going vertically. If there's one thing human beings are good at, it's building up. So when we're getting a lot out of it, I mean, especially that stat I think you mentioned, or it's in the article where they talk about being able to power the city of Los Angeles for like 10 months. That's incredible. So the investment that needs to be made there seems to make a ton of sense. I don't know where else this is going to work. Canals are something are not super familiar with here in the Midwest in terms of diverting water or for irrigation purposes. But man, if there are other places, this just seems like a no-brainer.
We just call it a creek. You know what? We just put it over creeks in Wisconsin. Same effect. It'll be good. The stats you're talking about, a study by the University of California estimates that 63 billion gallons of water could be saved by covering California's 4,000 miles of canals with solar panels that could also generate 13 gigawatts of power. And as you said, Jeff, that's enough for the entire city of LA from January through early October. I'm glad that you brought up the article from Food Manufacturing, because that was one thing that I always was curious about is like, okay, if we're covering everything with these panels, are we just, kind of killing all the vegetation underneath? So I thought it was really encouraging to see that things grow underneath and, it could be used potentially for some sort of agriculture. I mean, as to how we harvest that, I guess we'll see. We'll get the power from above and we'll harvest it from below, Anna. Now, when it comes to costs, there have been other projects like this around the world. One of the specific examples was the Sardar Sarovar Dam and Canal project that brought water to hundreds of thousands of villages in the dry and arid regions of Western India's Gujarat state. Now, that project wound up going under because of those costs. And so part of the issue with a lot of these solar projects is that they're so expensive. Unless you have any kind of government influence, they just don't get off the ground.
Yeah, I agree. And I think one of the key points about that particular project in India that they pointed to in the article was how much these folks in California were able to learn from seeing the failures of that project. And so I think that just speaks to how successful some of these initiatives can be if they're coming from the top down, I mean, I'm a huge proponent of solar, as anyone who's listened to this podcast before knows. I think when it comes to solar, there's a lot of no-brainers. There's a lot of challenges as well, like when it comes to infrastructure costs and relying on, I think, consumers to implement home systems, for example, is kind of an uphill battle. It's very expensive. The ROI can be longer term. You have a lot of folks who they can't pay up front to do that for the installation, the electrical system upgrades, all that stuff. And you have to own your own home. You have to live in a neighborhood where your HOA doesn't prohibit it for some reason, which some do because it's ugly. And I know also that many utilities do whatever they can to make it as advantageous as possible for themselves so they can continue to make money. They don't want their customers to make their own energy, really. So from a consumer perspective, there's a lot to get around. To be business and government, they have the most access to this. They have the most capital, and they also have the most to gain because these are just larger installs, right? So just like carbon cutting, I think that the power is really in the hands of big business and big government to really make a dent. So this type of idea, it's such a targeted and high impact solution. It addresses multiple problems at once. It said that they, were reducing the growth of, I think, certain weeds that were challenging to these crops as well. So there's just a lot going on there. And I think, the renewable energy gains that they talked about, this 25 gigawatts of renewable energy that they could, by covering, I think, 8,000 miles of Bureau-owned canals and aqueducts, That would be enough to power nearly 20 million homes. I mean, that's outrageous. And they said that it would reduce water evaporation by tens of billions of gallons. This is massive, and it's an intelligent way to start this discussion. I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
First and foremost, get your progressive climate change agenda out of my HOA. I don't want to see that. I don't want your progressive beliefs in my face powering our community. I will say that some of those numbers they threw around, they did say that is an estimate and nothing has been tested scientifically.
Yeah.
But I mean, even if they can kind of scratch this, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did you guys find it interesting, their backgrounds? So Harris, one of the partners, he's actually the former record label executive that co-founded Rock the Vote. And
interesting.
Yeah, kind of a interest. You know, there's always the tech guy, and then the guy that knows how to sell it, and clearly he's the guy that knows how to sell it. Which Rock the Vote, of the many trying to get the youth voter out in, was like the only one that was a success so far. Rock the Vote.
I can't quantify that.
Yeah,
I heard of it.
Yeah, we've heard of it.
I guess.
So it was a success. I do kind of go back to the projects that kind of failed in India previously, just because not just the capital cost being really high, but the maintenance issue as well. So it's going to take, like any of these renewable energy projects, they are going to be kind of learn as we go, and they're going to take a lot of maintenance up front as we kind of like figure it out. Do you think that solar almost still from Solyndra, when people hear solar, they still think like they have a bad taste in their mouth? Jeff?
I don't think so anymore. I think that has passed. I think if we're looking at, I know when we are looking at government investment here, but we're also looking at a company that is not owned by the government installing and maintaining and taking care of these panels. So I think that's a little bit different in that respect.
Yeah.
I also think this technology, I mean, it's been a decade since Solyndra or whatever, maybe a little bit more, 15 years. The technology has advanced way beyond those 15 years in terms of what the applications are. It was a cool point that Anna brought up too. I mean, they're talking about they spend like $1 million removing weeds from these canals a year. So just the benefit there as well, removing that type of cost center potentially is it's cool to look at.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
The weed issue. You know, essentially, I thought it was just a problem that I needed to roto-root out, every quarter. It's a problem everywhere.
You have your own weed problem?
Got my own weed problems here. All right.
Put a solar panel on it, and then put a rooster on it.
That's how we'll know. Is there a rooster on your solar panel?
No.
Oh.
Weak.
My house is roosterless, unfortunately.
I hope. Secret Santa this year. Yeah. Get ready for it. All right. Our next most popular story this week. Apple chip supplier delays U.S. plant due to lack of skilled labor. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, better known as TSMC, recently announced a problem that will push back the opening of its $12 billion plant in Arizona. Production was set to begin in 2024, but the chip maker recently announced a delay that will likely push the plant's online date all the way to 2025. The problem? A lack of skilled workers required to finish the job on time. TSMC says that they can't find enough workers with the skills to install advanced equipment. The company is now trying to fly in technicians from Taiwan to train local workers to help accelerate installation. The build has other issues like higher construction costs, a weakening market demand for chips, but major companies like Apple have already announced plans to use the 5 nanometer chips that TSMC will produce at the plant. Anna, I feel like we're getting far enough past construction costs that can't be a surprise anymore, that they're more expensive. Just because it's been more than a year now that construction costs are higher, you need to be able to forecast for that.
True. I think a lot of this was pegged on the skilled labor issue, but some observers and analysts were kind of like, well, there's other things, that we need to consider. And you just mentioned some of them. Construction costs, the market for chips, which is a little weird right now.
Well, people started hoarding.
Right. Exactly. So it's hard to know for sure, but here's a look at what TSMC's recent financials look like. The company announced a 23% dip in net profit for Q2, same day that they talked about this delay, compared to the same period last year, as As they say, the global economic downturn has taken a toll on overall demand. And they say that customers are still, as you mentioned, working through their inventory after the post-pandemic slowdown in consumer electronics and rising inflation. They've also said, though, that they believe this to be the bottom of that, as there are many customers that are clamoring for AI chips. And in support of that theory, TSMC just announced that they are investing in another big plant, this time in Taiwan, to the tune of $2.9 billion. Oh. That's specifically for the production of AI chips. So maybe that suggests that this could actually be just a short-term bump, and more than likely actually labor-related. What's funny is that even the experts are a bit perplexed as to what to expect about semiconductors right now. Just this morning, I read a report issued by Interact Analysis, who was talking about the impact China has been having on the overall chip market, where their economy is really experiencing a slowdown right now. But the North American market is booming. So they say that overall, the semiconductor sector, quote, paints a confusing picture, and that while production has declined massively, order books are filling up for machinery. The CHIPS and Science Act and the Inflation Reduction Act are having a direct impact on demand, with North America's orders soaring by over 50% in Q1 2023. That's according to, as I said, Interact Analysis.
Okay.
So I think it really just comes down to this. It's really going to depend on the risk exposure for these chip companies, and whether gains in other markets are going to offset the weakness in China. I'd bet that it will. While China has long been the largest market for chips, other parts of Asia make up the second biggest piece of that pie, and then America's the third. And if you look at the U.S. market, it's massive, it's growing. There's tons of opportunities for a company like TSMC, who has a huge amount of market share globally. So my feeling on this is, yes, it's a labor issue. Whatever the reason behind that and whose fault that was, we can get into that as well. But I do think that that's probably the crux of this, and not some of these other variables that some people are trying to pin on TSMC.
Jeff, whose fault is it?
TSMC.
Okay.
I think it's solely on them, to be honest, because if you're going to be, first of all, it's kind of interesting when we look at the technology involved with constructing and fabricating a semiconductor, a microchip. There's so much lack of clarity and confusion in terms of the supply chain engaging demand, and nobody is really sure what's going on. It's just really interesting when you see how much money is involved in just producing the product, and they still can't see exactly who needs it and where it's going at any given time. It's kind of interesting. I think a lot of this does fall on TSMC. I think this is sort of a scapegoat that they're looking for as to why this project has taken longer. When you look at installing this equipment, again, you're looking at an environment that is a cross between producing a vaccine and a computer. Okay, these are clean room environments, highly technical fabrication equipment. For there not to be enough skilled individuals on the ground in Arizona is not Arizona's fault. It is not the market's fault. It is not the level of skill there. It's TMC not being prepared to enter and build these new facilities. That's on them to not be prepared. You covered the construction costs. Come on. Everybody is dealing with that right now. If I had to guess, thinking this just was harder. You're looking at a Taiwan-based company coming to the U.S., the Southwest. It was just more difficult than they anticipated. And as opposed to just coming out and saying, hey, this was hard. Yeah. They're kind of trying to point a finger at some of these other areas and sort of passing the blame, if you will. They should have been better prepared coming into this environment for what it was going to hold. Now, one of the things that is interesting when we talk about all of these new fabrication plants that are coming online, Ohio, Texas, Arizona, there is going to be some issues. There is going to be some challenges once the plant gets up. Yeah. According to Deloitte, there might be over 70,000 deficiency of over 70,000 workers in terms of the skills it takes in these fabrication plants. So that's a challenge. But if TSMC is struggling before they even get the plant up to find the right people, they need to start looking internally at what's going on. The other thing I want to throw out there is one of the things I love about the manufacturing sector is we got challenges, we have problems, but we're also pretty good at coming up with solutions. And in Maricopa County in Arizona, just outside of Phoenix, they have come up with this 10-day program at some of the local community colleges. Are you going to talk about that?
Yeah.
Well, you can take it from
there. No. It is a cool program because you mentioned a couple of issues, right? So one is that they didn't they didn't realize that there wasn't going to be enough skilled labor to build the factory or even install equipment. And I understand that was kind of odd to me, especially because we've seen a lot of these manufacturers really leaning on OEMs. So I'm surprised that help isn't there from the machine manufacturers as well. Another thing is that, so TSMC, as part of this issue, they've been assembling a task force, right? It's more than 500 experienced workers with the intention that they're going to kind of fly in, provide assistance in setting up the complex specialized equipment. That kind of seems like something they should have had in place from the go, right? Just because if it is, and if it is such a specialized factory, you have this task force that's, and we've seen this with other manufacturers, right? They're almost like a roving team that wherever they set up a new facility, they go on the ground from the start, kind of get everything then ramped up, and then when they're ready to hand it off, they kind of make the switch. So it seemed like this was a little weird in terms of how they didn't have something like that in place. Again, maybe it's a scale issue.
It could be. I saw a report also that mentioned that there was Taiwan-based workers that didn't want to come to America because they were worried about the culture contrast. And so it's possible that they just
couldn't get them over here.
They couldn't get them over here until now they're, pants on fire and they need to
yeah. Double it, triple it,
just
whatever it takes. Bring the family.
Maybe.
And about that, I don't know if we're going to talk about the same one, but the one that I saw, Jeff, was the Maricopa Community College's Advanced Manufacturing Institute, right? Last year, so the state is doing everything it can, because a lot of times when we see a lot of these deals come about, we see how the state is going to help in terms of training a labor force, right? And sometimes we don't necessarily know what that means. So this program had 4,000 people apply last year alone, and they expect it to grow next year. But these are the jobs, these are the skilled laborers who will be in the plant, right? Like not building it. So right now it's kind of like hurry up and wait, where you're going to have all of these trained people kind of ready to go and now waiting until 2025, which could be difficult. The other is just looking at the skill level of the people that went in, because they were hoping that it would be a really fast training period. But they talked to one person that was like, yeah, they said anyone could come and they would train them. It's not my fault that I didn't know how to use a torque wrench. Just like I thought they were going to teach me everything. And so I think when, sometimes when you think of the base of understanding as to what you're going to, start working with, maybe there was a little bit more training necessary than they expected.
Yeah, the one I saw was actually a 10-day program. Where they can become qualified as a semiconductor technician, which again, after the fact, once the facility gets up and running, which is still a concern. Yeah. But there's actually a couple of these different programs throughout the country where they're working with Intel specifically to develop the skill set to help address, again, that 70 to 90,000 estimated shortage in terms of skilled semiconductor workers.
And so much is in Arizona. So that's what's crazy is how many fab projects are going on right now. So they have a lot of work to do. And I think it's fair that they're kind of relying on the state to help support those.
Well, I think that could be another part of the issue. It's not like there's no semiconductor fabrication facilities in the U.S. We're looking at globally, there is half the number of semiconductor plants as there are for automotive. Okay, so it's a different scale.
Yeah. All right, our next most popular story. Tornado damages Pfizer plant in North Carolina. Last Wednesday, a tornado heavily damaged a major Pfizer plant in North Carolina. All employees were safely evacuated, but parts of several roofs were ripped off and large quantities of medicine, like 50,000 pallets of medicine, were thrown around the facility. The plant makes anesthesia as well as 25% of all sterile injectable medications used in U.S. hospitals, including epinephrine for allergic reactions, fentanyl for severe pain, and the pain blocker lidocaine. The damage will likely lead to long-term shortages, while Pfizer works to either move production to other sites and or rebuild. Jeff, we talk about diversifying the supply chain, and then we keep running into these, we bring it up a lot on the podcast where there are going to be more extreme weather events. And then we see something like this hit a Pfizer plant. And now people have to worry when they're going to the hospital as to whether or not they're going to get a little bit of pain relief.
Yeah, it's crazy. Some of the other things they talked about there was just anesthesia. It's a big part of what they produce at this facility. And I think there's a couple of lessons learned here. Number one, from a business continuity perspective, having 25% of the national total of anything being produced at one facility is not a best practice. Now, you would think Pfizer would be able to look at that and say, hey, look, we shouldn't have been doing this in the first place. But you also wonder at some point, because we're talking about products that are associated with the health and life and death basically of people, there would be some sort of guidance there in terms of how much can be produced at one facility in case of this type of situation. Granted, it's not something you can plan for all the time, but we have to start, especially when there's already a shortage of so many of these medications. The other thing that I looked at too is, and we've talked about this a little bit in the past, is we've got another highly technical marketplace that has limited supply chain visibility. They just can't see what's going on and be able to predict things. And a lot of that is because I think of the way drugs are being developed right now. We've talked about this. Right now, the larger pharma companies don't want to be involved in those initial steps because they're time intensive, they're expensive, and they need time to move on and actually market and get FDA approval for the things they have on the marketplace right now. So they're relying on a lot of incubators and startups to basically go through. When it comes to drug development, there's 5 steps. The first one is just discovery and development. The second is preclinical research. That's where they want all of these companies to basically do the grunt work, lay the ground floor for these drugs. So then the Pfizers and the Mercks and everybody else can come in at that point and acquire them and take it from there in terms of doing the clinical research, getting it through FDA and everything else. This works to a point. Because once the big pharma gets those products to market through FDA approval, they patent them, but the patent runs out. As consumers, we're happy about this because when the patent runs out, that's when the generics come in.
Yeah.
The generics are tough on big pharma because they cut into margins, they cut down prices, all of that type of stuff. But then what happens is if you've got some of these smaller contract manufacturers producing these generics and they become unprofitable, they stop producing them. So it's sort of this vicious cycle between we want lower cost medication, we want more people producing it, but the lower cost it is, you're going to actually hurt the supply chain potentially because one of the things that they've alluded to for a lot of these shortages is a lot of these companies have gone out of business or they've stopped producing the drug or whatever the case may be. It falls back on the larger pharmaceutical companies to then produce them, but then it's a higher cost. So there's just this vicious battle between what do we want here? Big pharma charging more, the smaller companies who are more volatile and going to be impacted more by economic elements like the pandemic, like supply chain disruptions, going out of business and hurting the whole global supply. So we seem to need a better way of doing this. I don't have the answer, but we need to figure out a way where we can manage both price and supply for a lot of these medications without a tornado basically impacting an industry so violently.
Yeah, a quarter of everything on the market. Anna, Jeff brought up diversification and the pandemic. I thought that the FDA in particular during the pandemic really stressed the importance of diversification. And didn't they do anything to make it like more official other than like strongly suggested?
No, I don't think they did. No. But
well, come on, man. No, sorry.
I mean, so, some of that can be pretty hard to regulate. But
understood.
I would say that if you look at some of the reports that came out following this initial one, the FDA visited the facility a few days after this. It sounds like they're trying to make it sound like it's not as big of an issue as it initially looked for the supply chain in terms of impact. They do stress that there was some diversification taking place as it pertains to some of these drugs that are being produced here also are being produced elsewhere. They believe that shortages won't be immediate, but that the situation is dynamic, they're saying. So who knows exactly what will happen next. They did say that there are fewer than 10 drugs for which Pfizer's North Carolina plant is the sole source for the U.S. market, which seems actually high, especially if you are like, you take one of those drugs. I mean, that would be like a very precarious situation to be in. So to ensure that the current supplies are available and distributed equitably, the FDA's Robert Califf said that Pfizer has put the inventory of many products on strict allocation. These allocation measures could lead to localized supply disruptions depending on contractual relationships for supplies. Healthcare systems that have trouble obtaining a particular drug should contact their distributor or Pfizer directly. So ultimately, the fact that these medical supplies are generally diversified across multiple vendors is the good news. This is a testament to the kind of changes I think we've been trying to make in other industries, and shows that some of the pandemic lessons were good because they brought this type of diversification elsewhere, The bad news is that the disruptions, while localized, will create, I think, intermittent impact for Americans seeking healthcare. The FDA says that hospitals likely have plans in place to manage these shortages. So hopefully they can use alternative formulas for what they need. But of course, I don't think it's ideal for hospitals managing inventory in a way that they're going to have to use alternatives in cases where it's not an ideal choice. I mean, so that will happen, right? On a brighter side, like if fentanyl disappears forever, you wouldn't see me shedding any tears. I know there's a lot of other strong pain relievers out there that are much less dangerous.
Right.
So whatever about that, but.
Understood. But when I did break my arm and the bone was trying to pierce my skin and they gave me fentanyl, I was okay with it then. It reminded me of the Lennox story that we covered in case you missed it last week, Anna. Just because Lennox hit by a tornado, it took 5 years to get that plant back up and running, and a collective effort between the company and the community. I mean, granted, this is Pfizer. This is a pharmaceutical juggernaut. Things can be diverted to other plants, so it's maybe not. It won't take nearly as long, but and the damage wasn't as intense. But sometimes it really takes a long time for these plants to kind of get back up and running at full production. Could you repeat that one stat? Because it didn't blow my mind until you had already moved on to your other, it was something like the top 10 medications. Basically they said that they only discovered that there are fewer than 10 drugs that this particular plant is the sole source for the U.S. market. That's ridiculous.
They didn't say what they were.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and obviously there's inventory out in the market now. It's not like they just hold all of the world's inventory or the U.S. market's inventory of those products. But still, you wonder like how long is it going to take, or how can they take those specific products and those are probably on their short list to try to produce elsewhere as they're getting back up and running.
And not to downplay it, but one of the big things at this plant was the anesthesia, and there is no one size fits all. So it could be a lot of, we need a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So in some of those instances, you could see why they were only produced one place. 10 is still a lot, though.
Yeah. Fewer than 10.
Yeah.
So 9, I'm going to guess.
I'm guessing if that's the
9.
case. Yeah.
Either way, Jeff, any situation that makes my doctor go, you know what? It'll be fine. Instead of that, which is what's perfect, we're just going to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and throw in some wormswood, and we'll be fine. But
you know what's interesting, and this is like to your point, Jeff, about how much harder it is for smaller pharma manufacturers to like kind of keep up. Like, say this hit there, like how much harder would it be for them to get these built or produced somewhere else, or how would they rebuild? Could they rebuild? I
think this is a much bigger deal. I mean, the FDA is sort of trying to downplay that rebuild. I think that's going to be a huge delay. I think it's going to have a huge impact because, again, we're not talking about putting in a new CNC machine or a new assembly line. We're talking about clean rooms.
Yeah.
So you're basically, with this facility, if it was compromised in any way with the air system, that's got to be completely replaced. Those aren't small repairs. Those are things that take a ton of time, highly specialized. So I think this will have a bigger impact maybe than what the FDA is saying.
They just
Hopefully
don't
I'm wrong.
They just don't want anyone to panic.
No, and but anyone that tried to get any medication during the pandemic is kind of panicking right now, because there was a part during the pandemic where I couldn't get an inhaler for my son just because they weren't available. And that was terrifying as a father with a kid trying to breathe. So I can't imagine how far-reaching that'll be, and hopefully we can come up with some solutions, because wasn't part of, I get it was a different climate in the pandemic, but it was kind of like also finding other manufacturers, sometimes competitors, to manufacture a drug in the interim, because it was like, what were they called, where like they, like a critical drug, I can't remember what the specific term was, where they could like give the manufacturing to somebody else temporarily just because they had the capabilities.
But see, and that's part of the issue, because now that we're back to quote unquote normal, if that's not profitable anymore,
Yeah.
They don't have to say, hey, we're going to stop making this. That's one of the interesting things too. Drug maker doesn't have to go to the FDA and say, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. And that's where a lot of those supply chain visibility issues creep up because somebody who is doing it says, nah, we're not making enough doing this anymore.
Do you think that people should still, if there is no medicine available whatsoever, do you think that people should have access to the stuff that was on the floor? Because like for me, I'd rather have a I'd rather have a medication like with a 5-second rule than none at all. No? I don't know. Just like
they're called sterile injectable medicines, David.
Well,
not those. I don't want a dusty anesthesia.
You're gonna vacuum up the anesthesia with your wet vac, and then just
it'll be like an anesthesia slurry. I can
Jeff,
use.
Like if an aspirin were to hit the ground, would you?
That's not what they make here, though. I guess that's where I was going. Sure. Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm just
hypothetically speaking. Jeff.
I thought you were talking about vitamin here.
No, I mean,
facility.
Yes, obviously some of it you couldn't use like anesthesia, but if there were other medications that because of the clean room environment, maybe it's not suitable. Where so many things can happen.
Let me put it this way. Covering this market a little bit. If it was never packaged, never putting into a package, and they found it at this facility, no, don't touch it.
Yeah.
What if there was like insulin in the bathtub?
Bathtub insulin,
Jeff.
Boutique industry.
No.
All right. Our next most popular story. Supersonic X-59 nears first flight. Commercial supersonic air travel did have a brief moment in the sun with the Franco-British Concorde. But the noise, expense, and a fatal crash led to the aircraft's retirement in 2003. That's 2003 if you're a normal person. Now, NASA and Lockheed Martin are looking to make supersonic flight over land possible once again. NASA and Lockheed have been working on the X-59, the Quiet Supersonic Technology or QUEST aircraft, and they've been working on it since 2018. Earlier this month, the agency released photos of the X-59 near a runway at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works in Palmdale, California. The aircraft is gearing up for its first flight. The X-59 is designed to fly at Mach 1.4 or about 925 miles per hour at 55,000 feet and reduce the sonic boom to what NASA describes as a, quote, quiet sonic thump. It's pleasant. Lockheed Martin likened the intended sound to a car door closing. If approved, the X-59 could eventually lead to commercial supersonic flights that cut the flight time from New York to LA from more than 5 hours to about 2 hours and 30 minutes. So, for the math experts out there, half. Anna, now when they say it's going to be the equivalent of a car door slamming, is that if you're next to it, 55,000 feet, or on the ground, it's going to sound like a car door slamming as it passes by?
I think they're talking about the ground noise.
Okay, the ground noise.
For this, which is pretty incredible if you think about. They said that the thump is supposed to be barely noticeable on the ground. Mm-hmm. And since laws enacted over the last few decades mean that I've never experienced a sonic boom, I did some research to try to understand like what all the fuss was about. And there are some interesting reports of sonic boom damage prior to, I think 1973 was when they said no more. But pretty scary stuff. Like besides breaking glass, cracking plaster, and shaking objects off shelves, a boom from a single fighter aircraft in 1966 dislodged tons of rock, crushing archaeological sites. One report suggests that booms in other countries have caused cattle to stampede and even caused a roof to collapse in France, killing 3 workers. I'd never heard of any of this before. I know.
No.
So I guess you can see why this has been outlawed and why it needs to be addressed very carefully. From a market standpoint, I think looking at some of the things we learned from the Concorde adds some interesting context to whether or not this works for consumer travel. Of course, it's complicated. Obviously, the Concorde crash, as you mentioned, was a big factor in its demise. But there were other theories out there that Airbus itself was sort of instrumental in permanently grounding the Concorde because it was struggling to sell other planes due to the immense prices that British Airways was able to charge for tickets to get on this Concorde. So British Airways was like making all this money all of a sudden, and so it was like kind of Airbus was like kneecapping its own business having this plane. So the story goes, right? Mm-hmm. Because at one point after the crash, Airbus, so British law requires that a company hold a certificate of airworthiness for a plane. Airbus had that certificate. They refused to basically attest to its airworthiness, but they refused to also sign over the certificate to another company. So they didn't want anyone else to use it as a competitor, right?
Right.
I think part of it was due to the cyclical nature of air travel and how at the time the market was starting to soften. And so they had maintenance costs that were looming. They weren't able to charge as much. But to consider that Airbus basically didn't want its competitors to have it either suggests that maybe there was more to it than these handful of planes that did crash. So the market was there, I think, apparently. And now that technology has improved and maybe costs could be better scaled, you wonder if this is a good time to bring it back. Mm-hmm. But you may always have that cost challenge that will surface time and again when you're looking at the cost to operate these and the cost that you would have, what you'd have to charge. When consumers are more price sensitive, that could be an ongoing challenge for this type of air travel. So it'd be interesting to see if it were to come back and if something that could like exist for the long haul. I don't know.
Jeff, producer Eric wants to remind everybody that we have heard a sonic boom in our lifetime, and it was from Guile on Street Fighter. So we just wanted to make sure we cleared that up a little bit.
Thank you, Eric.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now,
Dynamite drop in.
Jeff, is there still a market for supersonic commercial technology, in your opinion, especially as we're getting closer to hypersonics?
Sorry, just the way you phrased that, like so seriously, I thought we were going to have like a really in-depth like aeronautics technical conversation here, which would
not on my watch.
Scare me very much.
Never.
No.
I think what this, to me, this is the ultimate thing that leads to the thing.
Yes.
This really is.
Whip, whip, whip.
Especially with all the stuff we've been talking about with the hypersonics. I think that is, this is a technology we have a comfort level with. We've just been talking about all that. What I think is also interesting is when you look at this prototype, where do the people go?
I know. I wondered that too. Like they keep talking about commercial air travel and it looks like a military plane.
Yeah.
It sure does, folks.
No, it's a tiny needle with 6 people on it.
I mean, it looks super cool, but I don't know where the people go other than the pilot. So, yeah, I think this is being developed to sort of progress a lot of other things. The other thing that I was thinking about in looking at this story was what you brought up last week, Mike Collins' article about where all of this, the funding in terms of innovative funding for new projects, where is it going? Why is it shut down so much? Well, I think in a situation like this, now they gave Lockheed like $250 million in 2018 to develop this plane.
Yeah.
Well, Lockheed is going to take this and develop other things off of that. So I think that's where some of that investment comes from.
Yeah.
And it will be exciting to see what Lockheed can do with sort of that. I mean, it's kind of crazy to talk about $250 million as seed money, but essentially that is what we're talking about because this does not look like a consumer application. This definitely looks like military and defense, which is a little bit sad because when we've talked about stuff like the Strato launch is doing and some other people like that messing around with some of those high-speed aviation craft, we think about the stuff that could be done for humanitarian aid when there are earthquakes and hurricanes and everything else that ravage some of these third world countries. We talk about what it could do from a logistics perspective in terms of alleviating a lot of supply chain issues. But yeah, this one definitely looks military, and I do think this is like a stepping stone to more hypersonic developments.
Yeah. Well, it is, what first of all, if you haven't had a chance to look at the photos, they're incredible. Because, and you're right, it is a whole lot of plane with a tiny little pilot in the middle. And it's like, and when you're looking at it, you're like, okay, no room in the nose, no room in the tail, but maybe if you like opened up like 6 seats behind the pilot.
What's crazy too, and they 14 feet high only.
Yeah, it's true. Well, that's another why you got to look at the photos because normally when you see people standing next to or juxtaposed to an aircraft, they look tiny. Whereas this really gives you a sense of scale where the guy that's standing, could almost reach the pilot. Yeah. It's really cool technology. One part that stood out to me was that so NASA is intending to do the test flights starting next year. They're going to fly it over several communities. So if you're in those communities, get ready to take like a really cool survey because so NASA is going to actually use this data, send it to U.S. and international regulators, and while civil aircraft at supersonic speed over land is still prohibited, I mean, that could change soon. And really, to me, it made it looked like the highest stakes like Survey Monkey ever built. Because it's just like, hey, did you hear anything like weird yesterday?
Kind of like a car door being closed,
like
but like above you.
Like a faint car door. Anything out of the normal. Just like, no, why? No reason. But no, it was interesting to me that, we have this $250 million to the prototype. And then when it comes down to how it impacts the community, just like, we'll canvas.
We'll just ask around.
Yeah. You know what? We asked a bunch of people and they all said they're cool with it. So let's go with it. Another dynamite drop in from producer Eric is the new hashtag where do the people go? So we'll get that one trending.
Well done.
Post haste. A sonic boom could be as loud as 200 decibels. So I'm not sure who this came from in terms of, this came from producer Alex. A sonic boom.
Check it.
Can our fact checkers check themselves?
Fact check this.
Producer Alex says a sonic boom could be as loud as 200 decibels. Rock concerts can get up to 110 decibels, but obviously it depends on how close you are to the source of the sound. And as a person who can't hear anything now as a result of his history of going to concerts, I understand how that can be damaging in the long run if you are parked underneath these. Producer Eric does say that everything checks out.
I believe everything Eric says. So
T's crossed.
I'm going to go with that.
I's dotted. Our most popular story this week. Why Stanley's plan to reshore Craftsman failed. In 2017, Stanley bought Craftsman from a beleaguered Sears for about $900 million. 2 years later, the company broke ground on a $90 million, 425,000 square foot manufacturing plant in Fort Worth, Texas. The factory opened in 2020, and Stanley said it could create up to 500 jobs. In March, Stanley announced plans to close the plant and lay off the 170 people working in Fort Worth. Stanley wanted to, quote, bring back Craftsman's American manufacturing heritage after Sears had shifted production to China. The plan included a highly automated plant that would pull costs down to be comparable to China's. But the pandemic threw off the timetable. The system didn't receive proper testing before being scaled up, and things went downhill quickly. For example, ratchets and wrenches would become misshapen in the press. Sockets had metal that wasn't punched out. And some tools didn't even have the Craftsman name stamped into them, which is important, branding. The factory still made thousands of sockets, but customers didn't want sockets without ratchets and wrenches. Last year, Stanley said that its core tool business suffered a drop in demand after a pandemic boom, and the company planned to reduce its facilities by 30%, lower the number of products it sells by 40%, and cut costs by some $2 billion. The cuts came right as many of the production problems were nearly solved. This is according to several former employees. With the company's U.S. dreams fizzled, Stanley recently revealed new plans in Mexico to serve the North American market. So, is it that demand wasn't there? Is it that the technology wasn't there? Or is it that things were just cheaper south of the border?
Combination.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things going on here. Craftsman, it's interesting. If you look up any type of brand studies, Craftsman still registers at the very top. There is a reputation here that hasn't been diminished through all of these challenges. People still look at it as a premium brand. Now, even though they realize it's a premium brand, appreciate the quality behind the name, doesn't mean they want to pay for it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a big struggle here. Just going back a little bit, when they talk about some of those, we talk a lot about digital transformation in manufacturing, especially right now. And it seems like that's what they were trying to implement in updating a lot of their processes and workflow. But just because you bring in the technology and the new equipment doesn't mean the processes are going to fix themselves. If you've got a product that wasn't stamped correctly by the time it gets to finishing, that's not the technology's fault. That's not the machine's fault. That's your process fault.
Yeah.
That comes into planning. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it seems like they're sort of, again, there's another story, I think, where we're shifting blame away from a lot of other factors that influenced it. I don't understand blaming the pandemic. Unless they're having trouble getting materials, I don't understand how you can blame the pandemic for not being able to iron out processes or implement technology, because it seems like everybody else said It was the perfect time to refine a lot of those things.
Yeah, I think the only way they're blaming the pandemic is because there was the surge in demand that fell off.
Fair enough. Here's the other big issue I think that Craftsman has. From a market perspective, before you went to Sears, what did you see? Craftsman tools. They were the only ones on the shelves. There may have been some other offerings, but they definitely, I guarantee you, they weren't right next to each other. And if you looked at a Sears catalog, sales flyer, whatever you want to say, what were they promoting? Craftsman.
Yeah.
It was the brand. They even splashed it on outdoor power equipment. Okay. Craftsman. Now, the two biggest retailers that Craftsman works with are Ace and Lowe's. If you go to Ace, and I just looked it up on their website, okay? You can go to Ace and you can buy a very standard screwdriver, and I believe in Craftsman, okay? It's a good product. It feels better in your hand, all that stuff. Standard 1/4-inch screwdriver, $8, $8 to $9. The same thing from an off-brand. I think the off-brand I saw here was Performance Tool. Actually, it's pretty popular if you go to the hardware store, $3. You go to Lowe's.
$3.
You go to Lowe's, you want a 10-piece screwdriver set. Again, nothing fancy, nothing special about it. Just a regular screwdriver set gives you the regular stuff. The Craftsman 8-piece set, $40. Cobalt, which is Lowe's brand, their store brand, 18-piece set, $20. Now, I get the difference. I understand the quality things, but if you're a more traditional consumer who's like, you know what, I just need a screwdriver so I can tighten the chain on my kid's bike, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You can still appreciate the brand, but the realities, the economic realities come face to face pretty quickly. And I think that is where Craftsman is really hurt right now. They've got an issue in terms of their marketplace environment that is killing them right now.
Well, and I mean, while we have seen a lot of DIYers and hobbyists and garage tinkerers, you know, the maker space is on the rise. Don't you think that there are fewer people that are just kind of working in the garage?
Oh, without a doubt.
You know, like, I mean, especially with so many things are designed with a closed system now. I mean, not that that really ever stopped me, but, you know, it's just like Craftsman is a brand for people that are going to use a tool frequently. Whereas I'm the consumer where I go to Lowe's and I see screwdrivers for 40, screwdrivers for 18, and I'm like, well, the ones for 18 will probably get me there for the 3 times I'm going to use this.
Well, especially, you know, I'm like that with a lot of stuff. I mean, screwdrivers, I use them a lot. Just, I don't know, weird stuff pops up. I was going to go buy, I need a new pair of pliers. The only pair of pliers I was going to buy were channel locks because I know they will last forever. I never have to deal with anything else. But there's a lot of other stuff. I use the spark plug socket for my lawnmower twice a year.
Yeah.
I'm going to buy the cheapest one I see. Okay. Yeah. So I think there is a lot more of that.
And a lot of this has to come down to the company, right? And just the fact that it seemed like it's crazy that Stanley had all these intentions, paid nearly $1 billion for the brand, paid $90 million for the new factory, but then when they were almost there, didn't cross the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they did a few things wrong here. And I totally agree with some of the factors that Jeff brought up about the market and people's tolerance for paying a higher premium, especially in this economic time where people are kind of
getting squeezed everywhere.
They are, you know. So let's go back a little bit to 2022 when Stanley said that its core tool business had suffered such a drop in demand after the pandemic boom that they were planning to reduce facilities by 30%, lower the number of products it was selling by 40%, which is massive, and cut $2 billion in costs. So I think this kind of slash and burn thinking has been not common, but more common post-pandemic, where businesses in all sectors who saw that pandemic-related bump saw their sales fall back to earth. And then it was viewed as a decline when, in fact, the bump was the problem. That was simply like a temporary and situational to the pandemic moment for them. And I blame shareholders for their expectations, but I also blame executives because I think that they should have done a better job forecasting and also maybe tempering the expectations of their investors when they, you know, people were like forecasting massively ahead. Like, you can't build on that. This is a temporary situation.
You mean like in the moment or after it had already passed?
No, I think in the moment, people got overconfident.
Okay.
And, you know, instead of looking at like, okay, hey, the pandemic, this is not going to last forever. Right. People just were like, this is the new normal. Yeah. Right. And we're going to build off this number as we go forward. And it like threw things off for a lot of companies.
Yeah, all of them.
And it just, it just felt very reactive. And And then you also hear about how dysfunctional this factory, startup was, and for so long. And unfortunately, I think in the end, it sounds like this plant was maybe a line item on a spreadsheet of cost centers. But perhaps it wouldn't be there forever because, as you mentioned, it was really, really close to maybe being fixed and getting to the point where it was actually going to make some money.
Yeah.
But they didn't let it get there. So that maybe was short-sighted. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But to pile on to the short-sighted or perhaps misguided approach, I think that was applied over the past 5 years or so to this company. The Wall Street Journal report that we sourced for this story also published a quote from Snap-on CEO Nick Pinchuk, who said that sometimes the ease of installing automation is a little bit overestimated.
Sometimes.
Well said.
Yeah.
Where that comes from is people don't really understand how the product is made in the first place. And wow, ignore the pun here, but I think he really hit the nail on the head there. I mean, and that to me goes back to maybe an executive team that's a little bit too far removed from what's actually happening on the manufacturing floor. Because it's easy to say, we should automate this. That's how we'll compete with China.
Yeah.
That's a very huge oversimplification of the process.
Well, yeah.
No, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I think there was a ton of hubris here throughout the Stanley organization, basically saying, you know how we're going to do it better? We're going to do it better.
Yeah.
That's how we're going to make it better.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of that was seen in the article where on multiple occasions, the executives would bring people through this plant. This was like their showcase, their reshoring initiative. We're going to build it better in America and in Texas. And so all these workers talk about the executives kind of coming through, showing off all the fancy things, and everyone, they cared more about it. It was their their show factory, just like their arm candy. But so Tom Felty told the Wall Street Journal it was supposed to be different. Tom is an electroplating engineer who said, quote, "It was supposed to bring the Craftsman brand back. It was all these new technologies. It's why I moved from North Carolina to Texas to be a part of it, and it was an absolute disaster." Ugh. And it was hard to read a lot of these very individual stories where they sold the community on it. They sold the workers on it. We are going to rejuvenate Craftsman and we're going to do it the right way. And then at the end, they just close the doors and end it. To your point, it seems like a line item, this manufacturing facility that all the execs were bringing people through is just got a for sale sign in front of it now. Yeah. The technology did not meet Stanley's expectations. The factory struggles also became worse. This part really stuck out to me because, quote, "the gray-haired folks with deep knowledge of tool making left the company." And not just that, but turnover in the tool division didn't help them either. I don't know where the blame comes, and I think it comes from the top down a little bit.
That one seems super weak to me because you can see it a lot of small to mid-sized companies. We've talked about the machine whisperers before and all that inherent knowledge that they have leaving the company and leaves them in a tough shape. If you're Stanley, you still make tools, man. This is what you do, and there should be some sort of legacy IT information technology in place that allows for capturing that information. This is not a mom and pop startup here that was just bringing on a new product.
But
that's so weak.
It is weak, but maybe it's these workers feeling like they were maybe more important to the operation than they were. But sometimes you have a very specific tribal knowledge as to how to get this sort of automation equipment up and running, and there's nobody else in your team, and you're retiring, and then it's just like, hey, I kind of understand why it didn't go according to plan. So Jeffrey Ansell, the company's president of global tools, when the factory was announced, he left and has since been succeeded by 4 other executives, which was crazy. Stanley's U.S. competitors say factory lines are partially automated, but still rely heavily on worker skills. Anna, the CEO of Snap-on, you brought him up, Nick Pinchuk, he had some real gems in there in this article.
Yeah.
The other one I wanted to pull out was that he said in 2010, the company's U.S. factories had roughly a 100-to-1 ratio of workers to robots. Today, that is 8-to-1. But the gradual transition helped the company identify the optimal roles for humans and machines. So he kind of listened to his own advice and kind of learned how to incorporate automation into the process and do it the right way. Whereas, Stanley just did underpants no math, where they're like, highly automated facility, ? Profit. It just didn't work out.
What did you call that?
It's the underpants gnome theory from South Park.
Not familiar.
Yeah. It's very simple. You steal underpants, ? Profit.
Perfect.
And how often we see that in regular business is crazy, where they're just like, no, this is the new shiny thing. Something will happen, and then there will be money. It happens way too often. We've seen it happen very close and personally as well. We're just like, well, how are we going to make the money? We have this. Well, what are we going to do in the middle? We'll have profit afterwards.
If you build it.
Yeah. All right. Well, before we move into, in case you missed it, or a deeper dive into underpants gnome theory with Jeff, we have another word.
There's a podcast
from our sponsor. And we're back. And just a friendly reminder for all you guys listening out there, BigCommerce provides modern e-commerce technology that works with your existing systems. ERP, OMS, CRM, no problem. Whatever existing business tools and technologies you use today, BigCommerce can integrate using pre-built one-click integrations or customize your automation with its APIs. Make the move to BigCommerce today. All right, let's move on to In Case You Missed It. The stories that maybe weren't as popular on the website, but still stand to make a big impact on the industry going forward. Jeff, I'll start with you first. What is your In Case You Missed It this week?
So I picked an article talking about the U.S. pulling the plug on the authorization for lithium exploration in Nevada. So federal land managers they voluntarily withdrawn authorization, of a Canadian mining company's lithium exploration project bordering on the National Wildlife Refuge in the southern part of Nevada. Basically, and there's a lot more detail in the article. Definitely recommend you take a look. What it comes down to is basically Nevada said yes to this Canadian company. They are Rover Metals, and said, yes, you can do these 30 test plots, drill in there, see what you can find, shouldn't be a problem. Mm-hmm. Well, then they said, no, you can't do that because it turns out we found out that this could create a lot of issues for the environment, different fish, other fowl, land, environment. It's a big deal, can't do it.
Yeah.
So this Rover Metals is obviously not happy about this. They're continuing to move forward, said we got authorization. Then Nevada came back and said, yeah, we're revoking that. Basically on what all of the environmentalists have told us, we overlooked some things, we screwed up.
Yeah.
Can't do it. I think it's interesting because number one, we're talking about lithium, which is something we need for all of those EVs. And this happens during a time when we're hearing more about, we ran an article not too long ago about solar powered cars. Okay. We're hearing more and more about hydrogen. We ran an article this week talking about a new material that's going to help with the transportation and storage of hydrogen. So we're continuing to see problems with mining because we can't do it right to get these metals that we need. Lithium in particular, if there was one you think that maybe they would look the other way on a little bit, it would be that because it is so rare here in the U.S. Not the case. They're not even letting them explore the potential, which is all this was of mining lithium here. So it's just interesting to see how we're seeing these two areas. We thought EVs are the way we're going, and you wonder if because we're running into all these obstacles from a mining perspective in obtaining the metals that we need, where are we going to go?
Yeah.
Is it a new battery technology? Is it something like hydrogen? Is it a different renewable source that's going to be what ultimately maybe slows down the EV surge until we can find something different to power these batteries? Now, granted, it's one mine, it's one situation, but there's not a lot of lithium options out there in the U.S.
Yeah.
So then it gets into the whole trade struggle we have with Asia and sourcing it from there. How are we going to make that happen? So it was just really interesting to me to see that basically I said, yeah, go for it. Oh, wait, we screwed up. No, you can't.
Yeah. Well, if you destroy what's left, what's worth saving? Have you changed your tune on the solar car?
No.
You're just like, we ran a story on a solar car. I'm like,
I'm saying
go on.
People are looking at different things.
Yeah.
So.
No, and you raise a really good point because agreed. When you see that they revoke the rights to even explore, I get it because, if they explore and then they find it, and what next? It's still a wildlife
you're
refuge.
going for it.
And then it's like, okay, well, and you start making concessions and it could be a slippery slope. Anna, your thoughts on this story and how, they actually sided with the fish in this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to see communities take the side of groundwater finally. And I don't know if that's because we're in such a dire situation in so many places, especially out west, in terms of like access to water and drought conditions and things like that. But if you look at where this is basically in the Mojave Desert. This is an oasis there. It's not like they have a bunch of water everywhere.
Yeah.
It's a desert. Yeah. So like if you were to somehow, I don't know. Poison it or, in any other way compromise this body of water, there's not 1,500 other little creeks and lakes and things like right behind it waiting to take over.
Yeah.
This is like a really important piece to that. So I'm glad that they are pressing pause on this and saying, but the funny part to me is how they said that they approved it in error. Like, like it was like, oops.
Yeah, Rover Metals was going to try to take it to court, and then basically the Bureau of Land Management in Nevada came back and said, yeah, you can't even take it to court because we're taking back the permission we originally granted. Mm-hmm. So,
well, all right. Anna, you're In Case You Missed It this week.
Me?
You.
I've been chosen?
It's your turn.
You are the chosen one.
The story I selected was titled, After Decades of Delays and Broken Promises, Coal Miners Hail Rule to Slow Rise of Black Lung. That's a very long headline. But it packs a lot in there. So a half century ago, the nation's top health experts urged the federal agency in charge of mine safety to adopt strict rules protecting miners from poisonous rock dust. And there's been basically nothing in terms of action since then. It's been fueled by denials and lobbying from coal and other industries. Experts say that it's contributed to the premature deaths of thousands of miners from pneumoconiosis, which is more commonly known as black lung. The problem has only grown in recent years, according to this report, because miners are having to dig through more layers of rock. They've already gotten the stuff that's closer to the surface. And as they go to less accessible areas, they're generating more silica dust. So the problem is getting worse. It's impacting miners who have only been mining for a couple of years even. Wow. So it's not like you have to do it your whole life. I mean, people are getting diagnosed with black lung at like 35 years old. One former regulator called the lack of protection from silica-related illnesses, quote, stunning, and one of the most catastrophic occupational health failures in U.S. history. So now the Federal Mine Safety and Health Administration has proposed a rule that would cut the current limit for silica exposure by half. There is some skepticism and concern about the government actually following through after years of delays and broken promises along these lines. But, just to reiterate, silica dust is said to be 20 times more toxic than coal dust and causes severe forms of black lung disease, even after, as I said, just a few years. An estimated 1 in 5 tenured miners in central Appalachia has black lung disease. 1 in 20 has the most disabling form of black lung. So the Mining Association is saying that companies should be able to comply by wearing masks, but the union is saying that masks are ineffective in these very enclosed, tight, hot environments. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure from this association, so let's hope that this ruling sticks. There's a lot of support in the Senate right now from Joe Manchin and John Fetterman and folks on kind of that northeast area where there's some mining taking place, and so let's hope that that this ruling sticks. It's something to kind of watch, though, because I don't know that it's necessarily, it's got to be enforced also. And that's the thing. Right now, they let companies self-report. And I think that's going to be a key problem maybe going forward in its effectiveness.
Jeff, one thing that stuck out to me is that it's only a half century or 50 years old. I feel like black lung was like the first ailment we knew about even before like asbestos and anything else that came like material related or work environment related.
It's a tough one because it feels like this is also such a cultural element, in a lot of this geography, this part of the country. Coal mining is a way of life, and people almost seem to accept a lot of the dangers that are associated with it, and I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it's like a rite of passage.
Yeah, so learning more about it, it's also hard to imagine that we don't have some form of PPE that would offer 100% protection from something like this. I know maybe nothing's 100%, but definitely better than what has been going on. I think we're finally at a point now where the coal miners are embracing this PPE for what it can be and what it can do. The next step is providing more of it. And just, I think, continuing to educate anybody about unsafe work environments. I think this is a case where maybe the workers, again, just embrace the situation for what it was. Now they're becoming more highly educated, more vocal about it, which is only a positive.
Well, and it is a failure on the industry that PPE doesn't exist, right? Because, I mean, granted, we're in a different product development time right now, but the fact that there isn't a suitable solution after hundreds of years of mining is kind of shocking when you think about it. Don't you think, Anna?
Yeah, but if you ask the Mining Association, they would say it does exist. You know, that's the thing. It's like that's the kind of struggle I think that's been hampering this for many years. Okay.
Well, as you said, hopefully it remains a positive development and there's a little bit of teeth to it. All right. In case you missed it this week, was a story about Cobots, because I'm a sucker for them. Cobots take on dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs. Now, Cobots, you should know by now because I bring them up every time, are collaborative robots, and they've been developed for manufacturing applications like machine tending, assembly, welding, and palletizing. But the ease of use and versatility have them showing up in some industries that might come as a shock to some people. This was a really interesting article that had 4 different unique cases and how a cobot is being used outside of the manufacturing industry. And I just wanted to highlight them a little bit because I think once we start opening our eyes as to where automation can be plugged into other sort of dangerous jobs, dangerous, dull, and dirty jobs, there could be some real positive things to come from it. One is overhead drilling. It's a common construction task, but it's also known to lead to occupational shoulder injury. Also, manual drilling leads to inconsistent results. If you want further proof on this, just look behind the TV I just mounted in my new living room, and you will see how inconsistent manual drilling can be.
You're not alone.
The Hilti Jailbot is a cobot-based construction robot mounted on a mobile platform to move around the construction site. This cordless robot uses digital plans to mark and drill holes. Another one is came from a strategic partnership from Canvas and USG Group, which is the inventor of drywall. This is a system that uses a cobot from Universal Robots to perform tasks like applying drywall finish by spraying the surface. The one that hits closest to home for me, though, is Okibo's autonomous finishing robot that can paint ceilings. That's the one we need right there.
About time.
I need that one at Menards, Ace, wherever. Just like, what do you need? I need to rent Okibo, and I need him for 2 days. Apparently, Okibo's a him. It also applies coatings, plaster, and like the one from Canvas, it also finishes drywall. The system can do things with a 50% reduction in cost versus manual equivalents. Finally, Rope Robotics created the BR-8, which is not only something that seems like out of the Star Wars universe, but a cobot-powered system that replaces dangerous manual turbine blade inspection, as well as cleaning and other repair tasks. The BR-8 is operated by a human on the ground and combines a UR cobot, a 3D scanner, a sanding end effector, a rotating brush for cleaning, and tools for dispensing isopropyl alcohol, and a final coating of leading edge protection, paint, and filler. This thing is incredible. The system not only improves safety and increases wind turbine performance, but achieves ROI in just 6 months. It's incredible. I think this is just a sign of more things to come. When we've talked about automation and construction previously, we were kind of talking about additive manufacturing, as 3D printing, building houses. But this is something where, even if we're using it in the stick building sort of construction industry, there is so much human error and rework that goes into that industry. And we might be able to automate some of those tasks out that make the homes a little bit better and a little bit safer job for workers. Jeff, I don't know if you had a chance to look at any of these specific applications. What were your thoughts?
Well, looking at the picture of Okibo, I'm not sure it's going to fit in your living room, man.
I'll get that through the door.
Yeah?
I'll get that through the door.
It is,
you know what? I'll buy a new door if I don't have to paint the ceilings.
Yeah, it is. And we've talked a ton about this, and I think we become somewhat overly used to it. It's almost white noise a lot of times when we hear about these new robotic applications because we're like, well, yeah, it's the next thing.
Better
of course.
Yeah.
But no, it is cool to see this stuff having a real practical application put to use in such great ways. And I think you hit the real nail on the head again, David.
Yeah, man, that
twice in one
that
day.
That nail is just smoked.
In that it's helping with safety. I mean, if you look at the OSHA reports, construction workers, construction firms, tons of OSHA involvement, shall we say. If we can eliminate some of that in terms of people getting hurt, as well as the fines that go against some of these businesses, all for it. And that's what a lot of this stuff is focused on, eliminating some of the need to get up on scaffolding or be in weird positions that are going to impact joints over the long term. So yeah, it's exciting to see this, especially the one with the turbine, because man, that looks terrifying. Well, some of the work that they have to do up there.
If you've ever seen the body cams or the GoPro footage that they have from being up there and how much they're moving around. Yeah. I would think that, the only downfall is that, if a robot's doing it, maybe you don't have the hazard pay of being up there, but you also don't have the hazardous job.
There you go.
Anna, I was all for the robot that saved from those dreadful avocado hands last week.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
But, while as that one's helping people around the nation build better burritos, I think all of these stand to do a lot of good in a construction industry that is kind of known for, being maybe a little bit harder on the workers.
For sure. And I think you hear the word dangerous and you think of severe injuries or like chopping your hand off when you're cutting an avocado or whatever. But in construction, there's so much built in around ergonomics.
Yeah, and the repeatable.
Right. Yeah. And how hard that is on somebody's body. And, some of these people who've been working in construction for a long time, they're like backs or rotator cuffs or, they're just cashed when they're like 55. Mm-hmm. It's just, and not everybody's in a union anymore or getting a pension or able to cut the cord at an earlier age like they used to. That used to be a lot more common. And so then you think you're later in your years and you can't do the job anymore because the job took that out of you.
Yeah.
That's really unfair to those people. And you can see why, to just from a recruiting standpoint, that if you could take some of that work out of the mix for some of these folks, that's not going to wreck their bodies, then that's hugely important.
No, agreed. They are the most fit people until their body finally breaks and then they can't do anything. Mm-hmm. All right, well, let's move on to final thoughts before we get out of here this week. Anna, what is your final thought this week?
So today is my wedding anniversary, so happy anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thanks, guys.
Way to go, Chris.
Yeah.
10
and Anna.
years today.
10?
Yep.
Just
10 years.
flew by.
I know, it did fly by. So Chris and my husband and I have a dinner reservation tonight. We're going to go out to dinner at a restaurant that we like, but I set up a reservation via Google on Monday, so 3 days ago. Mm-hmm. And since then, I have received 5 emails and a text between from Google and the restaurant.
Just making sure you're coming?
I guess, yeah. It's like Mikey and Swingers, just one after another. Okay, that's enough. No, it made me think customer service. I know that people really want to emphasize customer service, but there can be a point where you have maybe overdone it.
Yeah, too many touch points.
Too many touch points. Mm-hmm. 5 emails, too many.
Yeah.
It's too many.
On some things, but then when it comes to other appointments, like maybe a dentist appointment, I need all 5 of those.
I'm with you there.
It's just and I need it
This is a restaurant reservation.
It is a restaurant reservation. I get it. It's hard out there for everybody right now.
I feel like they're going to track me on my phone or something and just every 2 minutes says, are you still coming?
When it's 10 minutes from the reservation, just hey, we kind of checked your GPS and we know that you're at least 17 minutes away.
Yeah.
Are you still coming?
Are you still coming?
That actually that just happened to me. We ordered a pizza a couple days ago, and he said it was going to be 25 to 30 minutes for the pizza, right? And I ordered it at 5. And all of a sudden I got a phone call and he's like, "Hey, what's up? It's Calvino's. Are you coming to get your pizza?" I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm going to come and get it." He's like, "Oh, because it's been sitting here for 15 minutes. And I said, "It's been 27 minutes since I called. This is on you guys." And he's just like, "Just want to make sure you're still coming." So yeah, it can be the customer service can be the white glove can be too tight.
Take off the gloves. I
Take off the gloves.
don't need them.
Jesse, who's watching us live, thank you, Jesse. Always good to see you. She says congrats.
Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah. She's also, she's going to show up tonight and just be like, I heard we're going out.
We are. Yeah, I'll send you the deets, Jesse.
Jeff, what's your final thought this week?
So, asked last week for
Oh,
people
no.
to send us what they would not put in their can. Where is the camera so we can show off this mighty fine Today Manufacturing can koozie?
Yeah. There
Well
it
done,
is.
Jess.
But what's in there?
Just relax.
Ew.
You already
Settle down.
You already teased it.
So, we did ask our audience, what would you not put in the can koozie? Because I said Busch Light could not do it.
Yeah.
What about Busch Light Peach?
Oof, that doesn't seem to help. But we did some great responses. We had Smirnoff Ice
Oh, yeah.
as one that came in.
Joe's not going to ice any of his friends.
No.
What are you? Am I getting iced?
What? Really? That was like the third one you've done.
What?
You said he was going to ice him?
Oh, no. Like, haven't you ever been iced? Like,
Don't tell him.
oh, okay. Never mind. It's not a thing.
Never mind.
Never mind.
Is that when
It
you...
is no,
No, it's not a thing.
It's
No one's
not-
ever done it before. Don't worry about it.
and it's not something we want you to think about ever
What
again.
else did people say?
Did somebody do that to themselves at softball 2 weeks ago?
So you have something in your can koozie.
What
I see.
is it?
Just wait, I'm not done yet.
Oh, other things. Other things.
And somebody else also said any LaCroix product, unless it's in a Today Manufacturing can koozie. So not a fan of the bubbly water.
I love LaCroix.
And Miller Lite was another response, which I don't know if I get that one, but he did say his favorite is the champagne of beers, Miller High Life, which is a personal favorite of mine.
Wait, so
Solid.
he likes High Life, but he doesn't like Miller Lite?
Oh yeah, I get that.
Oh, I got
You're a real beer aficionado over there.
Yeah, I see Miller and I'm like, it's all got to be the same. Okay.
So I screwed up last week. I was going to bring this in, and actually I meant to get more than one can because 2 weeks ago we talked about Logan Paul's energy drink, Prime. The
Yeah.
one that got recalled in Canada, having the equivalent of 6 cans of Coke when it came to caffeine. So I picked one up. I was going to try it, and I was like, no, we should all try it
Okay.
and see what we think. I can't find it anymore.
Oh, it's right
I
there.
don't know if
Sad. It got. Do you think?
more cans. I didn't originally mean for us to split one. I was going to get everybody their own, but I can't find it anymore.
Okay.
So I thought we could give it a shot. We're at the end. You can use a boost for picking up the kids. And
Yeah.
Eric and I need to play some volleyball tonight in the 95-degree furnace that will be the sand volleyball court. So
That is going to be a sticky
you guys
match.
check it out here?
Sticky match.
It is super sad that you were only able to find one can.
Yeah.
well, I bought the one, and then I was going to go back and get some more, and I could not find them.
Whoa, that
It
is a
really,
pungent.
Yep.
This it does have flavors. This one's tropical punch.
Oh, okay. Well, it does
So,
pack
here
one.
we go.
Cheers.
What are we going
Thank
here?
you.
Cheers, guys.
We
All
start
right.
bouncing off the walls.
To heart palpitations. All right. Oh, it's for the kids. You know what? It's for the kids.
That is a lot of syrupy, sugary. Little too much for me.
I understand. It reminds me of my drinks in college where I'm like, oh, I don't have to taste bad alcohol. I'll just put more Hawaiian punch on top of it.
Yes, but the good news is it's got 200 milligrams of caffeine, no sugar, 300 milligrams of electrolytes, and it's vegan.
Oh,
So that makes it okay.
Good.
Anna, do you feel better drinking a vegan Prime?
No.
Okay.
How many more do you want? And aren't you glad? Do you wish I would have brought you your own entire can?
Oh my God, Jeff.
What would you be more likely to do? Drink that again or get into a flying car?
Jeff, I have a very important dinner reservation tonight that I have to
Don't
get to.
ruin
You've
her
got the
palate.
energy.
Yeah.
You're just going to be talking the whole time.
Yeah, when Chris is fading later, to be like, you should have had a Prime. My final thoughts is
You want more?
I'm good right now. No, all right, let's get a little keyed up.
Oh, man.
So I've mentioned it before, like receiving recalls for my RAV4 previously. And I think I brought it up on the podcast before where I received a recall for my headlights or the wire harnesses for the headlamps, right? And they just said, you know what? We don't need to do this one right now. You just go ahead and you tuck that right in that glove box. And when you need to use it, you go ahead and use it. And I'm like, that sounds like a great plan because nothing bad will ever happen. Well, I was driving home from softball the other night, and I was just like, I kept saying to myself, like, it seems really dark out there today, real dark, to the point where as I'm driving, I actually, on the interstate, I pulled up alongside another car to see how far you could see with their headlights to realize, like, yes, mine were quite dim. So it turns out all of my headlights just went off because of this problem with the wire harness. So I called Toyota. I'm already going in for an oil change yesterday, which sounds great, good time. And they're like, you know what? We can't get you in for the recall until Friday at 10:20. I'm like, okay, well, I'd prefer to see at night. So can I get some lights? She's like, you know what? You go ahead and get those lights fixed during your oil change. They'll do it to you for free. Do it for free because it's part of the recall, right? So I go there, let them know that, fix the lights, and then they inform me that I also caught a nail, so I need 4 tires. Yippee. And they replaced all the lights. So I thought, I'm going to check out, right? And I get the paperwork back. The only thing I wanted was, Anna, do you need that closer so you can fix it?
No, I just don't want to accidentally.
She's afraid it's going to jump out of the glass.
I don't want to knock it over and then lose it all because I know it's precious.
So in the documentation, I see that I have purchased 4 new tires. I have purchased everything except I declined the air filter because savings. But I don't see that they had replaced the 4 lights. And I'm like, hey, the only thing I wanted was to be able to see. They go back and they're like, oh, you know what? They did replace it, but it was a clerical error. So we're going to have to charge you for all the lights. I'm like, hold on a second.
What?
Tara on the phone said I don't have to pay for these. And they're just like, oh, you know what? It's just crazy with these manufacturers' recalls where, you know, if you would have had them fixed across the street, they'd be free. But since you're getting them done here, you got to pay for them. I'm like, hold on a second. I said specifically, like, I was told I don't have to pay for them. And they're like, okay, no, it's just tricky. You got to pay for it. Then you got to save the receipt. Then you have to mail it to Toyota and then they will reimburse you.
So you did this. It was not at a dealership. You didn't go to
No, it was at a dealership. This is at the dealership.
That's weird.
Thus, my being upset with the many red Toyota shirts in front of me trying to describe this or explain the situation to me that still makes no sense. And then they're like, well, don't worry because they're going to be replaced on Friday anyways. And I was like, hold on a second. So these brand new lights I bought yesterday for my car, when they have to redo them for the recall, have to be thrown away. Just ridiculous how these recalls are handled. And the fact that it wasn't fixed in the first place, that they told me you don't need it fixed until it's a real problem. Maybe when it's like headlights, just fix it because then you're driving dangerously in the middle of the night. And I was just, I normally sing the praises of Toyota and their customer service, but the entire fiasco was just bananas to me. And if I would have just gone out and checked the lights, it would have not have even been an issue because I would have been like, oh, look at that. Not in the receipt, all good. But it just seems like a weird, convoluted process in terms of how you do a recall with your car. I mean, a Baby Shark recall shouldn't make more sense than a headlight recall from Toyota.
I really feel like this is an isolated incident for you. I don't know. This is weird, man.
Like, why do you have to go back and get it done again? And that's
because they were only capable of changing the light. So I was at the service center, the oil, where they just do change your oil, stuff like that. They couldn't replace the wire harness there. I've got to go to the main.
Get that.
Yeah. So, and it made no sense to me where I'm just I kept asking the guy, I'm like, does this make no sense to you? Because I feel like I'm going crazy right now. And he's just like, oh yeah, no, this is bananas, but it's Toyota. What are you going to do? I'm like, that can't be the final answer. Yeah. And then they staple the little sheet that says, leave us a review, 5 stars, please. I'm like, give me that. And give me all those receipts for the free car wash. I'm taking them all. I was just very disappointed is what it really means.
Wow.
Yeah. Isolated incident.
I've had 3 or 4 of these recall things and man,
well, they've
nothing like that.
No. And you know what makes it even worse? And this one's on me is that when the lights went out, after softball, the day previously, my wife had used the car. So what is the first thing I do?
Oh, yeah.
What'd you hit? Or just did you back into something? Did something? I mean, don't worry. It's okay. It's okay. But just let me know what happened because there's no reason that 4 light bulbs would just go out for no reason on a car. And I just really should have thought that through.
I'm sorry for you. Yeah. That sounds very traumatic.
Yeah, it was. So if you get the recall in the mail, just go to the dealership and force them to do it until it's done.
Well, you know what I think you need to do?
Drink more.
Go home, find something you can put in your Today in Manufacturing can koozie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if anybody else would like one of these, just let us know what you would or would not put in your can koozie, and we'll send you one.
Sounds good. Just keep telling us what you don't want to drink. That's what we should send with it. So, like, when we send it to Joe, we should get him a Smirnoff Ice, some LaCroix for Mark, and a Miller Lite for Larry. I like it.
That sounds mean. Sounds kind of like what Toyota just did to you.
Well, oh no! No, she's watching live! No! But I said how that was the error of my ways, honey. As she types in all caps, blame the wife! I can hear her saying it that loud, too. Mm-hmm. I'm eager to get home. I'll take the rest of this Prime. It'll be good for me. But no, so note to everybody, get that recall fix. Immediately. And it's never anyone else's fault. But before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach any of us at Jeff, David, or Anna at in.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. And subscribe to us on YouTube at IN Magazine so you can talk to Carrie in this time of emotional turmoil.
Whoever will be replacing David, he's going to be on hiatus for a bit, unrelated to everything that just transpired.
All right.
And he just got a text.
Right?
That can't be good.
Why is my pocket vibrating? Well, for Jeff Ranke and Anna Wells, I'm David Manti. This is the Today in Manufacturing podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Hopefully. Thank you for listening to the Today in Manufacturing podcast.